In 2017, the murders of Wendy and Randall Bjorge in Gwinnett County, Georgia, exemplified a chilling truth that often the greatest danger lies closest to home. This elderly couple fell victim to a brutal crime within their own residence, a setting typically associated with safety and comfort. Their tragic deaths not only caused heartache in the community, but also highlighted the very disturbing reality that those closest to us can often pose the greatest threat. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me. Hope you're all doing very well today. I'm hoping that you're all feeling perky as it's quite dark and dull in the UK at the moment. I'm sure there'll be people watching in beautiful places right now thinking, what's she going on about? It's absolutely gorgeous. It's 85 degrees outside. I'm feeling a little bit, shall we say, subdued regarding the weather at the moment because I've been out watching my young lad fight in Thailand. He won. I know it's the taking part. They always say that, don't they? But he won. And it did feel good, although I wasn't present because clearly I can't watch my son in a ring hitting anybody or being hit by anybody. It's primordial. I want to jump in and join in and prevent any problems and injuries. And clearly I'd be the one injured because they're all a lot stronger than me. If you are wondering why I am rabbiting on and you don't know who I am and you just stumbled across this channel because you want to listen to the case, my name is Emma Kenny. I do crime and consistency. My content is released on a Wednesday and a Sunday every single week. It's deep dive orientated. So if you do enjoy finding out extra facts that you don't know about cases, then this is definitely the channel for you. Thank you to all of those who are returning. I love you dearly. Also, still recovering from nasal surgery that I had a while ago, so my nose is a bit distorted right now. Just putting it out there. Still can breathe through my nose though, so hey, we're on a good journey of positivity regarding the nose healing in the end. This case is one of those that I came across because I love watching interrogations. I know that loads of you will absolutely obsess, as I do, in watching real life interrogations. Most of those are American because in the UK we have a much more closed off confidential level to interrogations and it takes a lot more to get those released. But in America, well, Americans are amazing at having that in the public domain. And I suppose what really struck me about this case is just the reality of how often we think that we are among people who love us, but we have very little knowledge about what is bubbling beneath the surface in some individuals that are close to us. And this case exemplifies that to such an enormous degree. It really, really does. So let's look at our victims. So we've got 63-year-old Wendy and Randall Bjorge. They were going about their business, very well liked in their local area. They lived in a suburban home in a place called Lawrenceville, Georgia, USA. It's about 30 miles northeast of Atlanta. They were really well loved in their local community. They were really well respected. It said they were incredibly kindly individuals. They were those kind of people who would smile at you when you were passing in the street, and people didn't have issues with them. They were great neighbours to have. And more these days, when we live in isolated environments, we live in boxes, we drive in boxes, let's be honest, we get carried out of this world, often in boxes. I think that isolation provokes a less neighbourly concept to our environment, and these two people were the absolute juxtaposition of what I said. They were very much part of their local community. They were known to be incredibly generous, and if they could help you out, they would help you out. And sometimes it's that very generosity of nature that's the Achilles heel. Because if you're individuals who see the best in people, if you're individuals who feel that you psychologically can help other people who are struggling out, whether you can financially do that, emotionally do that, the point is that is a strength as far as a characteristic, but it's also a weakness because it means that it can lend you to walking into situations and scenarios that you feel you must help out in that can actually end up being detrimental to you on a personal level. And in this case, it's a fatal level. So this couple, as I said, are genuinely well loved. They've got 2 children, Amanda and Christopher, and they have 4 grandchildren. Now, as is the case in most families, we're bringing up our children, we're loving the way that they are, the way that they grow. They go on to have their own children. We're loving being involved in the lives of those children, and we're hoping to all intents and purposes that things are going to run smoothly. But that just isn't real life. I'm sure that many of you listening right now will have been the problem in your family. I was a little bit of the dysfunctional problem in my family, and whether we like it or otherwise, most of us will have had experiences of people within our family unit who are not necessarily towing the line, are a bit more problematic. And it's exactly the same in this family. So they've got their 17-year-old granddaughter, Cassandra. She's known as Cassie. That's Amanda's daughter, so their daughter's daughter, living with them at the time. Now, Cassie had been born in Atlanta. She'd moved to Lawrenceville during her childhood. And then in 2015, Wendy and Randall had filed for custody. And they'd actually won custody of Cassie in 2016. And that's no easy feat, is it? To actually decide to take on a 17-year-old young person with respect when it comes down to children and problematic behaviours. Obviously, it gets more problematic when they are older because they can say no more rigorously. They are more able to defend themselves on a physical level. So you can say to them, you're grounded, but they can often just open the door and get out. And to actually go ahead and think, you know what, in spite of all the issues this child may be having, we feel that we can offer them the consistency and the environment, which is actually going to have a positive influence over their lives and future. That again speaks to the testimony of what people say about Wendy and Randall. They were all round good human beings. The reason that they had gone for custody was that Cassie had quite a lot of behavioural issues. The mother was experiencing quite a lot of problems with her, so they wanted to step in and they wanted to intervene. And they wanted to do that in a diligent and legal way. That's why they filed for custody. But even though they managed to achieve that, and they assumed custody, because mainly they could see that she was going down a really bad path. So she was involved with this really bad crowd in Duluth, and they wanted to create some stability, some sense of consistency in Lawrenceville. It was a challenging decision to make, and it came down to one very specific reason. They wanted to provide her with a better environment and a more stable upbringing than she was experiencing where she was residing at the time. Now, Cassie went to Peachtree Ridge High School. She went there for a short period, but she did end up dropping out. It does seem that she's one of those individuals who just cannot toe the line. And we do see that. And to some degree, many individuals will grow out of those kind of behaviours. But very early on, you can actually see children who just cannot connect and commit to the environment within school. And often that's because the school environment is so rigorous and rule orientated that it doesn't really give much license for unique personalities. And actually we can equate the problems within the school system regarding behaviour to that system itself as much as we can to the individual child exhibiting it. But when it comes down to Cassie, it feels bigger than that. It feels like chances are there were opportunities missed to potentially diagnose her or at least explore some behavioural issues. What often happens in the school system is you see young people who fail to adapt to the environment, their behaviour is problematic, and then as opposed to them being cradled through that experience and the right kind of support being brought in and opportunities for that child to grow, it doesn't occur. They get thrown out of the system. So they become the problem and are removed, as opposed to people looking at the systemic issues that mean that children who don't fit the ordinary mould, so to speak, don't receive the support that they should and instead get, shall we say, extracted from there. So like I said, they're pinpointed as the problem and solutions rarely occur. So I do think that Cassie probably was let down fundamentally when she was in education, because it seems like her family really were trying to get her in order, but sometimes you need a more professional approach to do that too. So she drops out of school, and when she goes and lives with her grandparents, even though they're giving her this consistency and this opportunity to be in a really good environment, in a safe environment, in a loved environment, it doesn't feel as if that move is enough. So even though Cassie is extracted from the place where she has friends that are problematic with her, where her behaviours have become dysfunctional, as opposed to that new start creating an opportunity for her to thrive, it feels as if she just carries on being exactly as she has been prior to moving there. And Cassie was very vocal What I would say about this young girl is that when you listen to her in her interrogation and when you listen to her generally describing and discussing her feelings, she is incredibly fluent, she is eloquent, and it's disconcerting because when you hear that in conjunction with what we're talking about, which is a horrific, grotesque, brutal set of murders, it is hard to fathom how somebody with potential can end up in this situation. Now, of course, psychopaths, people with severe conduct disorder, because particularly when we're looking at younger people, we would be saying conduct disorder as opposed to something like psychopathy. But when we listen to individuals who, to all intents and purposes, let's ignore whether there's a classification there, can express themselves, can talk in a fluent motion, can answer questions in an eloquent manner, you're looking in and you're thinking, how has it ended up this way? How can it be that somebody with essential potential can end up in a scenario where they're being interviewed by detectives over a double homicide? And I think that's a real internal struggle that so many of us have, particularly when it's young people who kill, because you can't help but look in and think, oh, what could have deflected this behaviour? How could this have ended differently? And to all intents and purposes, when you listen to Cassie, you think surely something could have happened in her life at some point where there was a deflection of this potential. And like I said, when you hear her in her interrogation, you will, I believe, connect with my thoughts on that level. So she's now with her grandparents. She's fighting regularly with them. And to put this into context, between October 2015 and March 2017, police actually respond to the home 31 times. That's a hell of a lot of times in a 2-year period. And part of this is because she's running away. So there were 18 runaway calls in that 31 times. And that demonstrates that her grandparents are finding it really difficult to manage her behaviour, that she is oppositional to what they wish for her to act like, and also that there is a helplessness. Because the last thing that any of us want to do is to call the authorities on somebody that we love, because it can cause them issues down the line, particularly if they are criminally charged for certain things. So you can hear that there is a helplessness within the reactions of her grandparents. They're desperate for something to change. They don't know how to reach her. And so inevitably they're talking to and calling the authorities to try to engage them in a way that will give her some support. Now, Cassie had gone away and ran away missing multiple times. So on the 18th of December, for example, 2016 this is, Cassie actually goes missing and Wendy reports her. She was actually found 2 days later. But again, that's a huge amount of time for somebody to just disappear. Then on the 1st of April 2017, Wendy actually posted on Facebook, as so many people do when somebody is missing, to look out for Cassie because she's gone missing. She doesn't know where she is, and she's hoping that somebody in the local area is actually going to connect and say, well, I know where she is, or I've seen her. And one commenter on that Facebook thread said, not again. I pray that she is safe and returns home. So we're seeing this as a habitual reality. So even though she's been reported 18 times to the authorities, let's be honest, chances are there would have been many more times that the authorities simply hadn't been alerted because her grandmother wouldn't have wanted to get her into trouble. And she then updated again on the 5th of April that Cassie had actually been found. But even though quite a lot of those call-outs were for her being a runaway, they weren't all about that. So police had also responded to calls over domestic disputes and also illegal drug suspicion. Now, when Cassie was 16, she was actually charged with assaulting her grandmother. So this has gone to a point where there's been an escalation and there is a charge brought. So Cassie and Wendy had got into an altercation. Basically, it had been an argument because Cassie had come in late, she was being very disrespectful, and then Cassie actually threw water at Wendy. And to some people, I would imagine the idea of calling the authorities on your grandchild is a step too far, because you're thinking, well, this could essentially criminalise an individual, and how is that helping them with their future? Equally, when you have a child that is completely chaotic, is completely out of control, and nothing you seem to do is giving them the boundaries that they are going to require to not just survive in your experience, but to thrive in society in the future, You only have a certain set of opportunities and options. And when you've expended all of those, you're looking for somebody else to step in. So I guess that she wants to shock Cassie. She wants to make sure that Cassie realizes that she isn't going to accept that kind of disrespectful behavior. And also that other people take the behavior that Cassie is giving out very seriously and indeed criminally. So we can again mirror the helplessness that I was talking about regarding what Wendy and her husband are going through at this moment in time. Cassie's also got a boyfriend, and her boyfriend's a couple of years older than her. He's 19, he's called Johnny Hero Ryder. He also lived in Lawrenceville. I would say he's also quite a dysfunctional individual. When you think about Voyager, definitely these as a couple embody that whole definition. If they hadn't met each other, would I be talking about this today? It is highly unlikely, but that is so often the case, isn't it? It's so often the case that people walk around with these potentials, but you need somebody else to come and activate that potential. You know, you have the fuse, but somebody needs to light it for you. And when it comes down to Johnny and Cassie, without a doubt, that's what occurs. Now, we all appreciate that at the ages of 19 and 17, you think you're falling in love. That is something that so many of us will relate to. And indeed, some people would say it's absolutely their experience because we cannot deny a feeling. But often the intensity at 19 and 17 is so much more powerful because unlike when you're 25 and you're paying a mortgage, or you're 30 and you've got a couple of kids, you're concentrating your efforts on the life around you, not just the intensity of the feeling between you and your partner. When you're 19 and 17, you often feel absolutely as if that person that you're with is the only thing that matters. And that can mean that you're gung-ho and also problematic in certain behaviours if you feel that you two as a couple know better than everybody else, or that you two as a couple want something different than everyone else wants for you. So arguably, even though I'm sure they were feeling those feelings and they would be intense, they're probably embedded in a myth of their reality, which is that they feel that they are totally connected and in love, but actually it's a bit of a myth. It's just that they have only each other in that moment to be concerned about, and they're not actually functional and responsible in the world around them, so that they can put all of their emphasis and energies into each other and into some of the delusions that each of them have about how the world should work for them. So Cassie and Johnny, they have problems both together and separately. They end up having a run-in with the police together. This is in October 2016. And at this point, they were actually arrested on 4 counts of entering autos and financial transaction card theft, plus other charges. So they're being fraudulent, they're breaking into cars. These are things that really bode poorly when you think about their future. Firstly, because of the way that's going to impact on them on a criminal level. It's going to make it very difficult for them to get employment, shall we say. Fraud in particular is something that employers really do not like. Whilst we think about cars being broken into as a terrible thing to do, it's very different than what you would suggest is very callous and very devious behavior when it comes down to financial transaction fraud, because you've had to really calculate the fact that you're going to do something like abuse another person's financial wealth and health. And that again says to me that these two are operating in a mindset that does have that callousness attached to it. So let's look at what actually plays out in this horrific crime, because the reality is we should not be talking about this today. Wendy and Randall clearly deserve better than being murdered in the most heinous of ways. But it's not just because of the fact that murder should never happen. It's because they exhibit only good traits, and yet still they end up in a scenario where somebody like me is sitting in front of this camera and talking to you about the heinous reality of their last moments, particularly when it comes down to the fact that we're talking about the heinous reality of their last moments being ended by the very person they were trying to care for. But before we move on to talk about the actual crime itself, I just want to concentrate on Cassie for a minute. We've obviously talked about the dysfunction, But I also think it's really important to bring in the reality of how unusual this kind of young woman is. First of all, she's female. We don't really see females very often carrying out horrifically brutal murders. Secondly, she isn't some kind of spectator. She isn't some kind of passenger. This is part of her plan, what's carried out. So this is not where a man has coerced her into doing this. This is where she is an active and willing participant, if not leader. But also, we have to acknowledge that she isn't a full-grown adult at this moment in time. So at the age of 17, particularly 17 when you're under the influence of drugs, and there is a belief that these individuals within the crime were under the influence, and in the fact that the brain is still developing up until 25 years of age, we can look at Cassie and say, well, she isn't fully formed as a human being that she is going to become, and therefore potentially there is a level of hope of change. Equally, the kind of actions that we're talking about, we would be talking about a cold-blooded psychopath on a reflective level. She's too young at this point to diagnose in that respect. I'm sure that there's a chance that she's ODD. I'm sure that they would be looking at her and thinking she has conduct disorder. I can't find psychological or court reports that test to that, but it makes sense that that would be the case. But all that being said, from Cassie's perspective, she will see herself during this period of time prior to the crime as some kind of victim. She will not look at her grandparents and think these wonderful, wholesome human beings who have given up their freedom, their sanity at times to manage me, to give me a home, to love me, to care for me, to give me boundaries, to make me feel safe. She will see them as blockers, as obstacles to the life that she's trying to create because she is young. And when you are young, you don't have that much autonomy, even if you want it. And secondly, when people are trying to do really good things, but they feel bad for you because, hey, you're not letting me take drugs, you're not letting me go out and party with my friends, you're getting me into trouble with the police, you don't see the reasoning and the psychological and emotional beauty behind that movement, which is, it's because I love you. You see it in a way that makes you feel often bitter and resentful. She hasn't got the nuances within her psychology and with her emotional vocabulary to truly understand where that comes from. It's coming from a really good place, and it's a place of safety for her. She doesn't want it, fair enough, but her interpretation of it will be totally distorted. And that isn't defending Cassie whatsoever. But in my work with many young people who are very dysfunctional and very violent over the years, I know that when they interpret the world around them, they see themselves often in the victim state. Why can't they just go and let me live the life I want and I'll take my consequences? That's the mindset, as opposed to, wow, how loved am I? How cared for am I? That these people will sacrifice their environment, their money, their sense of safety to protect me from myself. It's just not the way that they'll see the world until they're a grown adult. Often it takes having children of their own that they care deeply about for them to be able to use that reflection in any way, shape or form. And like I said, I'm not defending Cassie whatsoever. I'm just trying to bring in the mindset that I think will be being forged within the actions that play out, albeit that those actions are totally extreme and incredibly, exceedingly wicked. We get to April 2017. This is when family members and friends start getting a bit concerned because they notice that they haven't seen Wendy and Randall Bjorge. So because they're good people and they're worried about their friends and the people that are important in their neighbourhood, they actually go ahead and call the police. This starts on the 6th of April 2017. And they basically asked them to go and do some welfare checks on the Bjorges. They hadn't heard from Wendy, they hadn't heard from Randall in about a week, and that is unusual. Gwinnett police go ahead and they do go and attempt 2 times to contact the pair to do conduct welfare checks, but they actually fail to make contact. They knock on the door, but because no one answers, they look around and don't notice anything suspicious, such as a forced entry. They don't actually break in, so they just leave. Now, just going to throw it out there that I'm not sure, just throwing it out there, that as a welfare check, knocking on the door and being like, nobody's answered the door, probably just leave now. I'm just thinking, could it not be that the welfare check is to check the welfare of the people? And if somebody isn't answering the door, that could potentially mean that there is a welfare issue. Okay, so they do it once, off they go. I suppose we can forgive that one. We can say, well, okay, maybe they thought they could be on holiday. Doesn't seem to be any problems here. But when they go back a second time, you would imagine maybe we need to consider the fact that there could be people in a problematic situation. They could have been struck down by some awful illness or something even worse. But to just leave, it feels a little bit strange as far as I'm concerned, because you have to put yourself in the position of somebody really being in danger at the moment that the police arrive, and them just walking away because nothing seems amiss. It is amiss because people in the local area are saying it's amiss. We haven't seen Wendy and Randall, and that's very unusual. On the 7th of April, missing persons reports are filed for Wendy and Randall. And then on the 8th of April, at this point, police get alerted because the pair's 17-year-old granddaughter, Cassie, and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Johnny, have turned up at Johnny's sister and basically attacked Johnny's sister and Johnny's sister's boyfriend. And the reason that they get alerted as the connection between the Randalls and this situation unfolding is because Cassie and her boyfriend had actually driven her grandparents' car to his mother's house on Rambling Woods Drive in Lawrenceville, which is where they carried out the attack. So now the police are like, oh, hang on, this couple have been missing. There's a file for them literally not being present and we're searching for them. And now their car has turned up being driven by somebody else, albeit related, but nonetheless somebody else other than the couple. So Johnny's sister and her boyfriend, at this point, they claim that Johnny had beaten them up with a baseball bat and also attacked them with pepper spray. Now, what does that say to you? That says preparation. There's one thing grabbing an item that's available when you get into an altercation with somebody, which is a terrible thing to do, but you can kind of make sense of it. It's why crimes of passion occur. But it feels as if Johnny has turned up with Cassie prepared. So not just the bats, but actually pepper spray. And if you put that into the context of an attack, it's quite clever. Because if you are going to swing at someone with a baseball bat, you have an opportunity for that to go awry. The person can dodge, they can react, you can end up being hit with it yourself because of taking it off you. If you use pepper spray, it causes disorientation. It's going to be problematic for them to get their orientation around how to manage the situation. And then boom, you've hit them with the baseball bat and they are totally unable to respond to that situation. So they've definitely prepared this particular type of attack. They've thought it out. So the way this apparently played out, according to Johnny's sister, is that Johnny had basically entered the house and just out of nowhere started a fight. They said that they think he was likely on drugs. Also, his sister was apparently a little bit annoyed because she hadn't noticed that her room had been rambled through. She thought some things had been taken. And the injuries were awful. So Johnny's sister and her boyfriend, they had extensive injuries. They were actually hospitalized after the attack. And like I said, this was completely unprovoked. They were not prepared for it in any way. They were not expecting it in any way. And what is going on in the minds of Cassie and Johnny to feel that this needed to play out? What have they pumped up within their mindsets and psyches to allow them and permission-base themselves to actually carry out such a heinous and brutal attack on these innocent people? When the police actually arrive at the house where the assault takes place, Cassie and Johnny have obviously vacated the environment, shall we say. They were nowhere to be found. They'd fled the scene. But this is when they notice that Wendy and Randall's car was there. Now, bear in mind, the police know that Wendy and Randall haven't been heard from in days, and yet Cassie and Johnny had driven the couple's car to the home where they'd carried out the attack. Now, bear in mind, due to the nature of the crime that had happened already, and also the real concern that now have for the Bjorges, the police are prompted to go to the Bjorges' home because they want to figure out whether something sinister has actually taken place, and it's looking more and more like that could be the case. So the police then dispatch and go to the home of Wendy and Randall. This is the 9th of April 2017. Now, just as in the two previous circumstances, when nobody answers the door, as they can't, police decide that they're not going to walk away this time. So they force the front door open. Now, upon entering and going up the stairs, it's horrendous because it takes them moments to realise that the reason behind them not answering the door on the previous two occasions is because they couldn't have. They find the lifeless bodies of Wendy and Randall Bjorge. One body is found in the hallway and the other was found in a bedroom. And it is a gruesome, barbaric scene. They were found with bludgeoning marks all over them, and they also had their throats slashed. So truly gruesome. And whenever you think about blunt force trauma, it's harrowing. You can see somebody being hit repeatedly again and again, and that's the way that they lose their life. But to additionalize that with slitting somebody's throat, I mean, you are 100% going in for the kill. There is no, well, it was a crime of passion. I hit them once or twice because I was so angry and then I realized the error of my ways. This is somebody who's gone out of their way to ensure that these injuries are fatal, and fatal they absolutely were. The authorities, once they look at the scene, believe that the pair had been dead for about a week, and immediately, bear in mind, they know that the car had been taken by Cassie and her boyfriend, so the police immediately suspect that it is the couple's granddaughter, Cassandra, and her boyfriend, Johnny, and that they are responsible for these horrific murders. But of course, the difficulty we've got here is there is no sign of the teen couple. And put it in the context of the authorities and the investigators at this moment in time, not only have they found a double homicide that's played out, they also know that Cassie and Johnny were quite content to go around to his sisters and brutally attack them. So these are a couple who are firstly on the run, secondly potentially armed, and thirdly 100% capable of doing the most heinous things. So they really need to bring them into custody as soon as possible, because there is no end to the kind of actions this couple are willing to go to. Clearly, they've murdered the grandparents and they've desperately injured one of the siblings. What else would they do? If you're a stranger to them, they're going to have even more of a likelihood to want to harm you, aren't they? You're nothing to them. Now, as the teen couple weren't in the house, the police then have to go about finding them, of course, and so detectives and crime scene personnel apparently worked through the night to find Cassie and Johnny. They must have been desperate to bring them in because, as I said, the potential for other crimes playing out would be so acute at this moment in time. And bear in mind, the couple have been dead for a week. Bear in mind, there's been 2 welfare checks where no action's been taken. And this means that that couple have had 7 days potentially to go and carry out even more horrific crimes. They are going to be on their toes, aware of the kind of views that people will have about the failures in actually doing something effective regarding those initial welfare checks, and meaning that people who had the potential to kill had been walking the streets or driving a car through the streets for that period of time. So they are working really, really hard. As far as they're concerned, they need to get this couple in, and they need to get them in ASAP, because they have the potential to kill and kill again without a shadow of doubt. Now, what's happened in that last altercation with Johnny's sister is that Cassie and Johnny had stolen her car. So that's fortunate to some degree, because they were able pretty quickly to locate it, and they found both Cassandra and Johnny on the 9th of April 2017. They were tracked down and they were located in this apartment complex in Suwanee, Georgia, and they were at home with a friend. Bear in mind, this friend had opened the door to them, having no idea that they were literally letting 2 murderers walk into their place. Police at this point do as we'd expect. They surround the building. They want to make the situation safe. They also attempt to speak to Johnny and to Cassie, but Cassie and Johnny refuse to come out, and then a SWAT team is sent to the apartment. And I guess that Cassie and Johnny at that moment in time may well have been thinking to themselves, well, maybe we'll just go out in a blaze of glory in their mindset. Yes, it's macabre. Yes, it's malevolent. But in their mindset, it was almost like a Romeo and Juliet moment. You know, here we are, star-crossed lovers in the most dark, depraved ways, and our reign of terror is about to be ended. Maybe we should let the police take us out, kind of thing. And we see that death by police officer. It happens, you know, more often than it should, shall we say. But a SWAT team gets sent out because they want to try to negotiate with the couple. They're young, after all, and the most important thing is to figure out how on earth this is played out. So them being brought out alive is important. Finally, they are able to actually arrest the pair. So there's this standoff with the SWAT team, and it concludes with the SWAT team entering the building. And at this point, they actually find out that the teens have tried to take their own lives. They had cut their wrists with a knife, and certainly they weren't small injuries where Cassie is concerned. So they get rushed to Gwinnett Medical Center. They get treatment at that point for their self-inflicted stab wounds. And it's worth noting that no officers, fortunately, were actually injured during the event. But again, that lends itself to a little bit of insight about the psychology of both Johnny and Cassie. Clearly, in that moment, they made a decision that they didn't want anybody else to have power over their future. And trying to take their own lives meant that they essentially would choose their own fate as opposed to somebody else choosing the fate for them. It also talks about, to some degree, a low impulse control, because it's no easy feat harming yourself. And like I said, Cassie seemed to fare badly in comparison to Johnny, but nonetheless, Johnny was injured. But I do think that it demonstrates the kind of psychological issues that she was facing at the time, that the willingness to harm herself and try to avoid being captured, but also the willingness to die in that moment. Even when you think you're the kind of person who could take your own life, we know that hormones like the GABA hormone in the brain, we're kind of given this sense of, no, you can't. Even if you think you should, even if you think that's the best escape route, the actual going ahead and doing it can be incredibly challenging. But she goes ahead and tries. And I don't doubt that she was trying very effectively to take her life in that moment. So again, it talks about her having a low impulse control and also a poor understanding of risk and a lower sense of fear because of the way that she's acted in this moment. Now, after they're treated in hospital, they get taken into custody. Of course they do, because they're both responsible as far as they're concerned for a double homicide. Johnny got discharged and taken into custody first, and then she was taken into custody 2 days after that because she got discharged 2 days later. Now, the police, they discovered that this is how it had played out, the actual crime. And it's both disconcerting and utterly chilling to imagine that they premeditated and planned this in such a way. So they discover that Cassandra and Johnny waited outside the house for her grandparents to go to sleep. And the reason we know a lot about this particular crime is that Cassie is incredibly forthcoming. So in the interrogation, she takes you through it detail by detail, piece by piece, explaining and expanding on points as to how this crime played out.
So so I guess when do you decide to go back to your grandparents' house in the middle of the night?
It was like a couple days after, like 2 or 3 days.
Mm-hmm. You remember Saturday, Sunday? Do you have an exact?
I don't really remember. Like I didn't really even know like what day it was that we went into the house.
And before you did that, did you and Johnny meet up somewhere at a park or something to talk about what was going on?
We went to Peace Church Park and we talked about it. At first, it wasn't my idea at first.
How did you even get, I guess, what was said? How did you even bring up, what was the context?
He first asked me, "Are you afraid to die?" And I said, "No." And then I asked him, "Are you afraid to die?" And he said, "No." And he was just talking about how we could like run away together, you know, that kind of like dream. And he asked me, he was like, "Would you kill your grandparents?" And I kind of like hesitated for a minute. And I was like, "Why?" Things like just seemed different. They didn't look at me the same anymore. Like they didn't, I don't know, it's like the vibe that they have was like, they didn't really know what to do. They didn't really know like how to like be around me, I guess. They didn't really know how to talk to me. So I didn't really know like how to talk to them either. So it was just a really hard.
There's a big age difference too, so.
Yeah. And then, you know, before all of the stuff happened with my parents, you know, like they treated me so much differently, you know. They had, you know, they trusted me, you know, I could have done anything at their house, you know. He goes into my grandpa's room and then I go into my grandma's room. And yeah.
And then do you hear kind of what's going on over there? And does that kind of cue you off to with your grandmother there?
Yeah, he started going at it, and then, you know, I could hear my grandpa just yelling, you know, them fighting, and then I started getting the rush, and then, you know, like, that's when I started hitting my grandma. She started like screaming and stuff, and
was that the first hit?
Yeah.
The back of the head?
Yeah. She bit me.
I think I took a picture of that yesterday, right?
Yeah, she bit me in my finger too, but I forgot which finger It was on my right hand. I think it was either like my middle finger or it was...
So they know they want to kill her grandparents. They're waiting outside, waiting for them to go to sleep. Then they sneak in to the elderly couple's home. This is using Cassie's key. And this is where the attack begins. And police actually said that the victims had suffered really severe blunt force trauma and sharp force injuries. They kicked them, they punched them, they beat the pair with a tire iron, a hammer, a baseball bat, a butcher's knives, and the attacks finalised and culminated in the horrifically gruesome act of slitting the couple's throats. And I think that that is such a level of disrespect, intimacy as well, because you have to be up close and personal when you do that. And that says something about the relationship between Cassie and them. And also the disregard for the humanity in that moment. You can imagine the terror and the horror in the eyes of those individuals as they were murdered. Now, after that happened, after they'd gone ahead and literally executed this innocent, lovely couple, they didn't flee the scene. No, they knew that they were going to have a problem with decomposition the longer they were there. So they decided to seal off the crime scene. They taped up the windows. They sealed the doors with coal to hide the smell. They sealed 2 doors in the house and also the front door. They poured bleach over the bodies. And then Cassandra and Johnny just carried on being in and out of the home during the next period of time before the bodies were found. And they actually hosted parties in the same house where they just murdered Cassie's grandparents. Just imagine that. So the lifeless bodies of Cassie's absolutely brutalized and murdered grandparents are upstairs in that house for days, and they are partying. They're inviting people around. They're taking drugs, getting high. They're ordering Chinese food. Literally partied downstairs for days. They invited friends around. They smoked weed. They didn't actually tell anybody who they invited around about the fact that the grandparents were dead upstairs, but they were. And I guess that there's 2 ways of looking at that. So the first is, obviously, they didn't tell people who were coming around that the grandparents were upstairs because that person may choose to then go off and inform the authorities, which would spoil their fun. But it could also be a level of disassociation. If we seal it off, if we pretend it's not there, then we don't have to psychologically acknowledge our actions. The second is a more sensitive and empathic way of exploring their psychology. The first is probably more likely that they just didn't want to get found out. But I think it's important that we look at the potential that it could be that they're just trying to pretend that they haven't gone ahead and carried out those actions. But arguably, we know that they then go ahead and try to really harm Johnny's sister. So that disassociation probably seems less likely. It probably comes down more to a callous reality of knowing that decomposition is going to happen, the smell will come through, that's going to disturb their fun, and it's also going to invoke people to actually take action if they realise that there are dead bodies up there. It also speaks again of their premeditation and their, I would say, low-level sophistication, but nonetheless, there is a level of sophistication in putting bleach over their bodies and sealing the doors, etc., to make sure that the smell doesn't come through. So they are thinking about their crime and also thinking about how to get away with it for as long as possible. Now, as soon as the news breaks that Randall and Wendy have been found in this situation, the whole community was absolutely blindsided. It's the way that so many of us feel when we find out that young people commit these heinous acts, particularly when these heinous acts relate to somebody who loves them. But even though we regularly hear and sadly hear about murder in the press all the time, when it's adults, we kind of have a not acceptance and not a feeling that that makes sense, they're adults, it's adults who kill. More of a sad reality to acknowledge statistically that when murders play out, it tends to be older people, for example, it tends to be fully grown adults. When it's young people, it really blows our mind because young people are at the very beginning of their lives. We imagine that they're dealing with the innocence and naivety of growing. We think that they're full of, yes, the problems and the pitfalls as they grow through the years, but they're not thinking about cold-blooded murder. We don't think that the kids that are living in our homes who are playing on their different PlayStations and Nintendos, etc., are actually at the same moment imagining what they could do to us because we're annoying them by giving them kind of boundaries and rules. It's a horrible idea to imagine that you can open your home to somebody that you love and end up dead. And that's what they're trying to compute. They're in shock. They're in disbelief. And the community have all these questions about what the motives may have been of this crime. Like, what was the prelude? Why? And I think that makes sense because you want something that's concrete. You want to be able to formulate a narrative that makes a sense of this scenario playing out, i.e., well, what was happening to Cassie? What was wrong with Cassie? What were the variables that led to this situation playing out? What did Wendy and Randall do that had caused such a reaction? Of course, the truth is, well, they loved her. They did nothing wrong. And that's even more difficult because at least in scenarios when you see something like Gypsy Rose Blanchard, let's look at her, for example. I've covered that case in detail on my channel. So if you haven't seen that, please go and watch that. She's obviously been released recently. When you look at that case, genuinely, I have absolute sympathy and empathy and understanding for Gypsy. I can see the chain of causation. I'm like, with respect, killing is bad, but when it comes down to her mother, when you think about battered people syndrome, where they literally think there is no way I'm ever going to leave here alive unless I kill this person, that's how it plays out psychologically and psychiatrically. There is a recognition of that. But when we're talking about Cassie, no reason whatsoever, aside from the fact that her grandparents were annoying her by caring deeply enough to have some boundaries about the actions and her behaviours. And yet this has led to them being brutalised in such a fashion. So the local community is just absolutely stunned. And police actually said this case was really unique and really disturbing because they too were trying to explore how this had played out. So police end up appealing to other teens who knew the couple, who'd actually seen them in the week of the murder, and who could maybe possess information that could be critical, essentially, for the homicide investigation, could lead them to a greater understanding. Parents were actually asked to question their kids to see if they were actually in that house between April the 1st and April the 8th. They wanted them to come forward to the police to fill in the gaps and to tell them whether they'd seen anything unusual, because they didn't understand as a police force how this had happened and how this couple had just nonchalantly carried on, had people in their home partying, got high with them, had fun, eaten takeaway. And all the time, the bodies of Wendy and Randall are literally decaying upstairs. When it came down to the medical examiner, they said that the manner of death for Wendy and Randall Bjorge was homicide and that the cause of death was an incision to the throat, but both victims had also suffered blunt force trauma and, as I mentioned before, sharp force injuries. Now, in a police statement, they said that Cassie had pretty much from the get-go just confessed to killing her grandparents. And as I said earlier on, it's quite chilling, upsetting, and also you're left with this sentiment of, why, Cassie? Why? Because she's so able to describe her actions and she takes responsibility for those actions, but she does it in not a nonchalant way, that's the wrong word to use, but she wants to tell the story. I don't think she's excited by the story, she wants to explain the story. And she's so able to eloquently do that. And you think, if only you had put your interests and your passions and your possibilities into something other than the senseless murder of these people of great meaning in this world. Because she certainly has potential and had potential to be a different type of Cassie to the one that inevitably she's turned out to be. So she's very open with the authorities. And when it comes down to her main reasoning behind why they went ahead and carried out the murders, Cassie basically says it's because Johnny and her had basically had enough of them, the people in their lives that were giving them rules and responsibilities and things that they didn't feel they wanted to follow. It's also worth noting that at this point, while Cassie was very forthcoming, shall we say, Johnny hadn't actually said a word. Now, allegedly, Cassie tells the police that Johnny begins the attack on her grandfather, and then she said that from seeing that, from that occurring, she has this surge of energy. And during this surge of energy, she ends up dragging her grandmother, who, by the way, at this point was tied up with duct tape, into her grandfather's bedroom. And you can't even begin to conceive of the fear and the horror that her grandmother must have been enduring. Can you imagine knowing that the person that you love, that the person that you've sacrificed your space for, you've gone to court and got custody of, you've tried to give a better life to, is killing you? And there will be a point in the beating, there will be a point in the situation where this horror is playing out, where her grandmother, where Wendy will have known and felt and understood that these would be her last moments on this earth, and that this girl who she cared deeply for would be the individual to take her final breath from her. I cannot even begin to compute how utterly devastating, challenging, and just utterly sacrificial to some degree, because that's what we're talking about, aren't we? We're talking about the sacrifice of opening a home to this child. We're talking about a sacrifice of time, of space, of money, of emotional feelings that were time and time again abused by Cassie, where Wendy's concerned. And then in the end, that whole environment that she's offered and opened to this child ends in her being sacrificed by Cassie to what Cassie wants, which is, as far as she's concerned, a greater freedom. That's why she kills her grandmother. It's not because her grandmother's done anything wrong. It's just she gets in the way. And that's the biggest and most ultimate sacrifice that occurs in this situation. I know it's not one that's willing, but you understand the experience that I'm explaining. That's how it feels. When it comes down to what plays out regarding how they cover their tracks, police said that Cassie admitted that she texted family members who were worried about Wendy and Randall from Wendy's phone. So she's trying to cover the tracks in that way as well. So like I said, she's trying to get away with this. When she's interviewed in the interrogation, she's really quite calm and she's so detailed. She's very detailed about how she felt about the relationship with her grandparents. She's very detailed in the way that she starts to talk about how her and Johnny came up with the plan to kill her grandparents. She said initially it was Johnny's idea, but often we say things because we're pissed off, or we throw things out there that are ridiculous, and what we need is the other person next to us to be like, wait a minute, you're being ridiculous. We're not going to kill anybody. But that's not what happens. So when Johnny throws this out, clearly she hooks onto it and she's like, yeah, we could do that. It takes somebody really malicious, really cold, really calculating to be able to hear something ridiculous and to make it into a cold, brutal and tragic reality. And that's what she does. So apparently, according to her, it's Johnny's idea. And then she's just able in that interrogation to go through piece by piece, detail by detail about how they carried out their plan. And she said that during the horror that played out, her grandmother actually said that she'd do anything that she wanted. She'd give her money, she'd give her the code to the safe, anything that could mean that Cassie wouldn't go through with this brutal plan. And Cassie heard all of that. And she even talks about the fact that her grandmother defecated and urinated, because obviously when somebody is literally terrified, those bodily functions occur. And none of it stopped her. She was just able to coolly, calmly, and in the most calculated manner snuff out her life. And during the pleading, understandably, Cassie does manage to get the code to her grandmother and grandfather's safe. And even though she's got this information, she still goes through and kills them. So after they murder the couple, clearly they've got access to some money. And she even is able to, and I would say in technicolor, describe how Wendy and Randall were killed. She said that apparently she felt terrible, but there was so much going on with the grandparents that she just couldn't handle it any longer. So essentially what she's saying there is that she did have the prick of conscience. She did know that what she was doing was wrong, and she did feel bad, but not bad enough to just not kill them. And when you think about the list of possibilities and the list of opportunities we have in life, killing somebody to get rid of the problem is the most extreme reality. And like I said, there are certain scenarios and cases where you can look at it and you can think both on a professional and just a personal experience. Well, yeah, I have an understanding psychologically why they formulate a decision to actually go ahead and do something so grave and grotesque as murdering somebody, because there is no other way that they think they can escape. That's not the case for Cassie. Cassie happily ran away regularly. She knows that she can get away. She's the one causing the disturbances. She's the one causing the issues with violence in the family. It's not her grandparents being abusive towards her. There's a whole heap of possibilities and potentials that she could have followed through with that would have left her grandparents alive, like literally running away and staying away, or refusing to live with them, asking for support from someone else, returning home to her mother, and so on and so forth. She hasn't got very long until she's going to be considered an adult. There are literally reams and reams of possibilities. But in spite of those reams of possibilities, she suggests that her need to just not have to deal with them anymore usurps their need of life. That's what it comes down to. Also, it's then discovered that it wasn't just her grandparents that were going to pay their ultimate price of their lives, because Johnny and Cassie had actually got plans which went far beyond the murder of her grandparents, because the teens also had intentions of murdering other family members. This included some of Johnny's family, hence why he went with her and attacked his sister. Also members of Cassandra's family, so she was going to kill her mother, Amanda Sterling, but apparently Johnny at this point backed out of that plan. And that could be for numerous reasons. It could be because he's realized that killing does something to you. You know, some people can just go ahead and cold-bloodedly murder and carry on. For others, initially, they can go ahead and carry out an action, but then as the conscience starts to prick and the reality of the actions start to come by, it can change the way that they feel. So it could be that that's why he doesn't go ahead and carry out the killing of Cassie's mother. Cassie actually went ahead and spoke about their intentions to kill all the other family members in the interview with the police. She again blames Johnny for the idea to kill his family. So at this point, they're accused of attempting to kill Johnny's sister and her boyfriend, understandably, because they'd attacked them and given them extensive injuries. So it wasn't just something they were talking about, it was something that actually gone and done. Now, the teenagers' arrest, fortunately, meant that they didn't get to carry out any more of those murders. But when you think about the period that the bodies were in that home and those 2 welfare checks that led to nothing, it was possible that other killings could have been carried out because that failure to act hadn't occurred right from the get-go when worried people were reporting those people missing. Now, when the media asked Amanda, Cassie's mother, about what had happened and how she felt about the plan to kill her, she just expressed absolute disbelief. She said that at no point, reflectively or even in the present moment, while she was dealing with the process of acknowledging what her daughter had done, did she fathom that such a nightmare could ever have happened in a family. Yes, there were problems with her daughter, but while she had a fair share of behavioural problems as far as Cassie was concerned, Amanda never believed that it would lead to anything this serious. She actually was quoted as saying, "Not in a million years did I think something like this would ever happen." And that makes perfect sense. Even when actions and reactions of people that we love are outside the realms of what we would consider acceptable, very few of us would ever dare to believe that the people that we have in our lives are capable of the malevolence and macabre actions that I'm talking about today. And so too, for Amanda, it will just be incalculable to imagine that a child that she gave birth to was capable of the actions we're covering today. We get to the 12th of April 2017. At this point, Cassandra and Johnny were charged with murder, aggravated assault, and theft. They were both held at this point without bond, which makes sense. No one wants this kind of individual walking the streets. A long-time friend of Wendy and Randy, so the people who've been murdered, a guy called Jerry Devetrell, he said that when you look at the couple, they were just this great part of the community. They spent a lot of time with the granddaughter, they taught her to swim as a child, and that he and others felt absolutely blindsided by the fact that this child that was loved by them ended up killing them. And a lot of people from the local community brought flowers to the home, just wanted to represent the meaning that Wendy and Randall had in their neighborhood. And he was actually quoted as saying, "It's unbelievable. They are going to be missed. They were great in this community and neighbourhood." And their son Christopher said, "We are all upset and hurt by this devastating loss. My mother and my father were both kind and gentle people who lived to help others." And that's a true picture of the couple that I'm talking about today. That's how everybody felt about these individuals, people who benefited their community, benefited their family, and indeed had tried to benefit their granddaughter. So we get to February 2018. At this point, the two teens appeared in court. Both of them pled guilty because there was no way they were going to get away with doing anything other than pleading guilty. And of course, Cassie had been very forthcoming with the information, but arguably they would never have been able to get away with it. And bear in mind, we have living witnesses as well in the form of Johnny's sister and boyfriend, who were also brutally attacked. So they were banged to rights. It was never going to be something they could have ever pleaded anything other to. And I guess the other side of it is they wanted to know that potentially the death penalty was off the table. Of course, they both blamed each other for the plot. It's always the way, isn't it, with teenagers in this situation? You know, they've got this deep loyalty outside of being incarcerated. Oh, we love each other. Everyone's trying to keep us apart. And they create these ridiculous plans of such great harm and malice. And yet the moment that they're both looking at a life in prison, oh, suddenly all of those feelings of loyalty just dissipate. And all of a sudden it's like, it was his fault. It was her fault. It was most definitely his fault. It was absolutely 100% times infinity her fault. That's the way they approach it. So all that loyalty, all that apparent love, completely gone. Blaming each other. It's all him, it's all her. That's how they ended up dead. And the truth is, it was both of them. It was without a shadow of a doubt, both of them. They concocted this plan together. They acted out this plan together. They happily ate Chinese takeaway whilst the bodies of the deceased lay in the rooms above them. They did that. They swallowed every mouthful, every morsel. That takes a certain kind of person with a certain kind of stomach to be able to manage to do that. And the press did comment on the fact that both Cassie and Johnny had broken up. But like I said, it was never going to be something that they could have sustained because they're going to go to prison for a very, very long time. It is intriguing, isn't it, though, that these individuals can create and cook up such horrendous plots, and they genuinely believe in the moment that they are truly a team. And then the second reality dawns, the second they're in a scenario where they're looking at something ultimately that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives, that selfishness just comes crashing in. And both of them are unbelievably selfish human beings. Because that's what lies at the root of it. It's their needs above and beyond anybody else's needs. So of course, when it comes down to taking the blame for the other person, the party, that's not going to occur. They're selfish. So no matter who did what, they're going to blame the other person. Because firstly, it means they can be less accountable and responsible. Oh, it wasn't really me. I was just drawn into this game. I didn't really think we were going to go through with it, etc., etc. And also, it means that there is a hope in their mind that somebody's going to believe them above the other person, the other party who's saying that actually it was their fault and vice versa. So that's the reasoning. It's deep selfishness. And both of them acted in the most egotistical, selfish ways that any human being is capable of being and acting like. Now, the Bjorge family, they described the loss, which was immense. So Chris Bjorge, who was the couple's son, said, "I miss my mum and dad." Chris was actually too emotional to read out his own victim statement, so his wife read it out, and he said, "It is sad to me that the first time they visit my house and meet my children is in a paper bag from a funeral home." That's just so devastating, isn't it? The idea that the grandparents who would have loved their grandchildren will never meet them, and the only way that they'll be present is because the bag of ashes is present in the home that they live in. Sylvia Berman, that was Randall's sister, she said, "My heart is still broken." And she laid down the questions she has when she thinks about the murder of her brother and his wife. She says, did he die quickly? Did Cassie see his face? Did he see Cassie's face? Someone he loved so much, someone he was so proud of. And I think that so many of us relate to that, don't we? This idea of those final moments of victims when their lives are taken by an individual that they love. You know, the horror, the shock, the feeling of betrayal, the absolute disconcerting reality of, is this really happening? Like some kind of nightmare, but being played out in Technicolor of your reality. Those questions haunt those who survive and also the family members of those who are left. The list of questions that are given no closure because the person who needs to answer it is no longer present. It makes perfect sense that she asks those questions to herself again and again. Sylvia also went on to talk about the last communication that anyone had even had with the couple. And it's so tragic because Wendy had literally sent Sylvia a message before she went to bed saying, "I'm going to bed soon. Maybe tomorrow will be better. All I can do is hope for the best and expect the worst. It shouldn't be this hard for any of us." Please say that that message was sent whilst Cassie and Johnny were hiding outside, waiting to come in and attack, which they literally did moments later. And that message just demonstrates how caring Wendy was. Even though she knew that times were going to be bad, she was willing to push through it if it meant helping Cassie. Unbeknownst to her, in that moment where she's texting, the child that she believes so deeply in is lying in wait, ready to murder her. Sylvia went on to say their devotion was so profound, it makes this betrayal even more devastating. And it does. We're talking about two extremes, aren't we? What polarities exist. There we have Wendy only thinking of how she needs to work hard, be the best, do what she can for Cassie, in spite of the bad times. And equally, we've got Cassie just not simply unwilling to accept the care, but willing to literally destroy the very vessel that was offering that care. It's inconceivable, and yet it's true. Before the sentencing, Johnny Ryder actually pled for forgiveness, so he was somebody who might have been quiet at the very beginning of this, but at least when it came down to the court case and the sentencing, etc., he went ahead and took responsibility. He said his own actions were evil, and he said, "Please, I beg you all, forgive me for what I have done. I know what I have done is abominable and evil and is deserving of hellfire. I would like to express my deepest apologies to the Bjorge family. I am so sorry for the pain and grief I've caused all of you." And even though that does not in any way make up for the killings, it doesn't excuse them in any way, shape or form, I do hope that that comes from a place of truth. I hope that Johnny really feels that, because he's young enough to have some hope as a human being, to develop the compassion and the empathy that is so required to eventually make his life, albeit in prison, something. If he can feel that prick of conscience, there is genuinely a hope for his humanity. When it comes down to Cassie, though, at 17 years of age, when she was tried for this, she refused to say a word. She did cry a bit, but that very fluid individual who is very open about what had happened right at the beginning was mute, all but a few tears. Now maybe that's because she has a sorrow too deep for words, but it's probably more likely that she's just thinking about herself. Gwinnett Judge Deborah Turner, that was the individual who presided over the case. Wow, she had such profound disgust at the actions of these teens. So she highlighted during the sentencing the brutality, the heartlessness, as she put it, of their actions, and she described it genuinely as one of the worst cases she's ever dealt with. In fact, she said, "I just continued to be stunned that you sealed areas so that you could make sure the smell of decaying human flesh wouldn't be noticed, that you had parties and ordered Chinese food with two people that you had brutally murdered lying upstairs. I'm not sure I've ever imagined such a well-planned, despicable, heinous act to be committed by two such young people." She said the heartless and depraved nature of what the two of you did says to me, it's not worth my time. It is just terrifying, isn't it? Terrifying to imagine this young couple, as the judge saying, just seeing the lives of these two incalculably important people as totally disposable. You're getting them away. You're not worth my time. I can't deal with you anymore. And that the answer to that was to kill them. Now, as both Cassie and Johnny pled guilty to the crimes, that meant they were spared the death penalty by the plea deal. And so when it came down to the sentencing, the teenagers each received 2 life sentences with the possibility of parole after 60 years, in addition to a concurrent 21-year sentence. So I think we can agree that it's highly unlikely that either of them are going to have any freedom in this lifetime. And even if they do, ultimately, it will not be that of a life where they get to do the things that other young people will ever have the opportunity to do, such as get married, have children, careers, etc. That will be something that they forfeited, and rightly so, because of the heinous actions of their murders. I guess when it comes to today's case, one of the things that's really upsetting is it reminds you that sometimes the greatest monsters are the ones that inhabit our homes with us. Often we like to think about predators as being cast in the shadows, as individuals hid around dark corners, but the truth is very often they're sat next to us in our own homes, in our own lounges, watching television with us on a day-to-day basis. They're the people that we need to be most terrified of. And in this case, Cassie absolutely exemplifies what I've just said. Wendy and Randall, they should be thriving. They should be watching as their generations that they have created further generations ahead. They should take the joy of their family and what they created, and they should feel a sense of their lives having great worth and meaning because of all the work that they did. And instead, they ended up brutalized, bludgeoned to death, with their throats slit by somebody who was meant to love them. This case demonstrates that, like I said, monsters and murderers are too often the people that we love more than anybody else in the world. And it's just such a terrible indictment of the reality of the world around us. As ever, guys, let me know your thoughts. I always like to hear what you think. Do you believe that Cassie and Johnny are redeemable? Is it possible that they can develop the conscience? Do you think that it was more Johnny who carried out this crime, or could it have been that Cassie was the mastermind? Or was it just that Voyager where 2 individuals, both with a propensity for evil, came together and indeed carried out that evil? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time. And as ever, guys, be safe.